So we're going to talk about corded baskets, corded rugs, and embroidery on the corded rugs. Now, these are really fun to make, but even if it's not your thing, we're also going to talk about avoiding needle breaks and thread breaks when you're doing embroidery, especially on some unusual materials. I'm Cathy. This is Sewing Tech Talk. Join me because I think this is going to be really fun. So as you can probably guess, I'm kind of addicted to making rope baskets and rope rugs. Well, I'm going to call them cords. So you can use up your scraps. The supplies are really not that expensive. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our basket. I'm going to show you how to do that, how to prepare for that. And then once I get the base done, I'm going to show you how I embroider on the center of them. So having said that, basically the process for this is you're going to take a cord. We'll talk about the supplies in a second. And I wrap it with fabric. And then I sew it together with a basic zigzag stitch. You can make your baskets kind of shallow. You can make them just about any size. This one's kind of a very useful one. You can make placemats or table pads, very useful. You can make the edges kind of fancy, which is kind of neat. Here's a scalloped kind of edge, and there's all different configurations that you can do. So what supplies do we really need? So let's kind of dig in. So basically I have my machine set up. We're going to start this by sewing, and of course you're going to need some cord and you're going to need some fabric. We'll talk about the machine setup also. So there's two different types of cords that I use depending on the project that I'm going to create. Now a basket needs some structure, doesn't it? And a rug or a placemat doesn't necessarily need structure. So I use two different cords for that process. So this is your basic, this is clothesline. It's basic multi-purpose clothesline. It's a braided cotton. The cords that I use, I tend to use the braided ones instead of the twisted ones because the braided ones are smoother. So this is the clothesline, and you can see it has a braided cotton outside over a core. Now this core can be removed, and I kind of do that when I'm beginning and finishing because it's less bulky. This cord is another braided cord. It's a polypropylene, which means it's a plastic material. It is also braided, and it does not have a core. Now, it is a little bit softer, so it's great for my flat items like rugs and placemats. And I take the cord and I wrap it with a either 3/4 inch or 1 inch strip of scrap fabric. Now a fat quarter will get you a whole bunch of coverage for a cord, and but I tended to use scraps. It could be cut on the bias or it could be cut straight. It really kind of doesn't matter. I find both very useful. So to wrap the cord, basically I take, and if I have an inner core, I'm going to kind of cut it away. And then take the fabric and start to wrap around the core at kind of a 45-degree angle, and you're just going to sit and wrap a whole bunch of cords. It's a great meditative experience when you're watching that kind of a movie where you just don't have to be too invested. So just sit in the chair in the evening, wrap your cord. When I join the two strips together, I just use some basic white glue, or a glue stick also works, and just a popsicle stick or a coffee stir to just put some glue and join them. I don't join massive lengths of fabric strips because as you're wrapping, it's kind of hard to make a big strip go around all the time. So I have a handout and it kind of tells you about this process. Pretty simple. Just wrap yourself a whole bunch of cord. So having said that, oh, and this cord, I'm telling you some sources for that on the handout. It's basically a large macrame cord. I found it under the brand name of Maxi Cord. It's a 6mm cord, and this clothesline is it's just short of a 6mm as well, which is about a 1/4 inch. I don't recommend any thicker cord. So now let's talk about needles and threads and all that kind of fun stuff. Oh my. Okay, so when it comes to getting set up, you're going to be going through some fairly thick stuff, right? So your machine's going to deserve a brand new needle. And because we're going through some thicker things, I'm going to suggest a sharp needle. Now, all the different needles, the different brands on their website, they tell you the differences between all the different needles. But when you think about it, you think about, what am I sewing on? What am I going to be embroidering on? So what we want to do is we want to reduce friction. I'm going to talk a lot more about that embroidery, because friction is our enemy when it comes to embroidery. So I'm going to select a sharp machine needle, and I'm going to pick kind of a smaller one, a 7511. You'd think if I was going through some tough cord that I'd want a thicker one, but when you think about it, that thicker needle is going to create more friction as it goes through the cord or the rope. So I want a 7511. I want a sharp needle. So here's your universal. It's a little bit rounded. It's not very sharp. Quilting or top stitch needles also, or embroidery needles also work really good because they are just a little bit sharper than that universal needle. Now, when it comes to embroidery, which we're going to talk more about later, have you ever seen when you go to the needle store that there's some needles that are titanium coated or chrome or anti-glue? There's needles with a specialty coating. Well, what's that coating for? That coating is to reduce friction. And like I said, friction is not our friend when it comes to embroidery. So these are some titanium coated needles. I have anti-glue needles, which have an extra slick surface on the outside. And I have some chrome, which are just extra polished, and they reduce the friction when you're stitching through the cord. And when I'm going to go into embroidery, what I've inserted into the machine is I have inserted a chrome embroidery needle 7511. Any one of these will work, but I've gotten good results from that. That coating on the outside is really, really nice. Now let's talk about your basic feet. When it comes to feet on the machine, the standard foot, here's the standard foot, and here is the Ultra T version, which is just, this foot is has a anti-friction sole on it, which really helps. When we're sewing on the cord though, what happens is sometimes we're going to have to be sewing and lift the cord very high along this edge. And this button right here, which is your leveling button, can kind of get in the way. So I kind of suggest at least using the in foot. Actually, the machine comes with a foot that's not meant for this, but actually kind of works. This is the R foot, and it's the foot used for making a blind hem. But since we're sewing the two cords together, I hope you can see that there's this like prow down the middle, this guide in the middle, and the cord can fit on either side. It's very close to the left side, which is what we need. So this foot works really, really well, and it comes with the machine. Now you can also get an open toe foot, which is pretty cool. This is the metal open toe foot. And if you look on the bottom, you can see that it has a cutout. So when we're sewing our cord together, here's two of our clotheslines. These aren't wrapped, but I think you'll get the idea, is see how it fits right under there and it kind of holds that cord kind of in place. And it gives me a lot of visual room to be stitching these two together. So, a lot of different foot choices, and find the one that works for you. Can you use just the regular foot that come with the machine? Sure. But sometimes a specialty foot is really makes your job a little bit easier. So wrap your cord, find your foot. We're going to put all-purpose thread in the machine for this. And I've chosen the regular zigzag stitch, and that stitch on this machine is 109. I've made it as wide as I possibly can, and I've increased the length. Now on the Baby Lock Altair, what you see is what you get. So that's basically what my stitch is going to look like. See, if I change the stitch, you can see it modify right there on the screen. So I want just that basic zigzag stitch. I think I'm going to put on this open toe foot because I find it works really, really good. I've put in my specialty needle. I've wrapped my cord. I'm just about ready to get started. So Oh, while I'm here, this doesn't have anything to do with the bowls, but the clothesline that you can find comes in big box stores. You can get it online. It's very easy to find, and it's pretty inexpensive. If you're going to be doing some home decor sewing, it makes great cording around the outside edge for those big beefy statements. And there's specialty feet that you can get when you're doing that. Whole bunch of different specialty feet. Like I said, they really don't have anything to do with a rope bowl, but I just wanted to show you that you can get specialty feet that really hold that cord in place. So keep that in mind. If you get a whole big clothesline and you only make a bowl, that extra cord, you have a use for it. It makes great piping around a decor pillow. So now let's get started. Let's move a lot of these out of the way. And I'm going to use my open toe foot. Now, here's my very first cord that I wrapped. And I hope you can see I wrapped it with a consistent color. I wrapped it using straight of grain cut strips. So there are some threads that kind of come out. This really doesn't happen if you've cut the strips on the bias, because these edges don't come off. You can trim them later, but I find that they don't make that much of a difference when I'm sewing the bowl. It's a little hairier, but it kind of works out. Now, if I'm going to make a round bowl, what I do is I take this and I'm going to force this into a small little coil. Take your time, because the cord doesn't want to cooperate, but make a small little coil. Then what I want to do is I want to have the cord so it's coming out across the bottom. You want to make the bowl so the large area comes over here on the left, because it's going to get big enough that even though the Altair has a really big harp, or the area to the right of the needle, your bowls or your rug's going to get pretty big. So make it so that your bulk of your corded bowl is coming off to the left. And so if you want to make a round one, you're going to start with a round item like this, coil it around. Then what I would do is I would stitch across, and then what you're going to do is you're going to keep going around, zigzagging a round at a time as you go around. But what if you want to make an oval bowl or a rug? So the rug I made, and we're going to embroider, it's kind of more like a doormat size, so that you can see in the center of the oval bowl, you're going to have the two pretty much side by side. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that this length isn't the finished length of your bowl, is it? Because as you add rounds, it gets bigger here, but it also gets bigger here. So it's not an exact science, but just figure that as wide as your bowl is going to be, it's going to get that much bigger on either side as well. So for my rug, I made about two parts of the cord side by side for about 8 inches. Depends on how big you want your bowl to finish up, but just experiment and see. So when I do that, then instead of making that coil in the center, I'm just going to take my two cords and lay them side by side. So I'm going to stitch down the center of them, catching both cords as I swing the zigzag, and once again, the cord needs to come off to the left, so I'm going to come over here, and my bowl's going to build this way. So let's get started sewing. So I'm going to put it down there. Now, one thing to know about the Altair. The Altair has an automatic fabric sensor system. Now, this is pretty thick. Like I said, it's 6 millimeters, so it's kind of thick. The great thing about this machine is it senses how thick your fabrics are. So I really don't have to make any adjustments. If you have a machine that doesn't have an automatic sensor system, you might want to adjust the pressure on your foot. The Altair, it does it automatically. How can you tell if your machine has that? Well, generally, if you have this button that raises and lowers the presser foot, that means the machine has the control of the pressure on the foot. So I just put my cord underneath the foot, I lowered the presser foot down, and the machine's automatically calculated how much pressure I need. So I don't have to make any adjustments. And I'm going to be sewing back and forth and going around and around and around my bowl. You may want to sew a little bit slowly at first until you get the hang of catching both of the cords. So I have a speed control and I can lower that, and that just regulates the top speed of the machine. The machine's already adjusted the pressure. I put in my new needle. I think it's time to stop yama yama and start putting my bowl together. So here we go. So I'm just going to hold them together. Now I've also engaged the automatic pivot feature on the machine. What is that? That means when I lift my foot off the presser foot, the needle's going to stay down to hold my work in place, and it's going to automatically raise that presser foot. You can actually also adjust the height of raising the presser foot. I find that it works great just the way it is, but if you're working on something bulky and find that it doesn't raise enough, you can adjust the height of that. As I come to this end right here, I'm just going to start to go around and turn around that outside edge. Because the foot lifted, all I have to do is adjust my cord. Now, as I'm sewing, my job is to hold these cords together. And what you're going to do is you're going to dance back and forth between the two cords with this 7mm wide swing of the needle. Now, every once in a while, this is a very meditative experience. I just really enjoy it. As I'm sewing around and around, what I make sure that I do is I catch both of those cords. If you're going to, as you go, it's a good idea to check your previous work for the past couple inches and make sure you don't have any holidays or you've missed sewing the two together. Because as the bowl gets bigger, it gets much more challenging to go in and fix those than it is right now. So let's sew going around and around. I'm going to make this until I want to do the turn coming up. And we can make a shallow turn, but I'm also going to show you how to make a pretty radical turn where the bowl gets a little bit deeper instead of being shallow. So here we go. So I've made my base. Now a shallow bowl, we're going to have to turn the corner to come up for that. A shallow bowl is really simple. Basically all you do is you just lift it up. I'll show you as we get there. You can also make a bowl, however, with a little bit steeper sides. You're going to start the same way, doing that gentle turn up, like I'm going to show you. But as you get taller, then you're going to want the coils to be more of a straight side. There's a little bit of a trick to that, but it doesn't take much. So let's get started. So as I've been sewing flat one side to the other. Notice I have the extension table on the machine, which really helps me get that project, keep it flat. And I need to keep the project flat if I'm doing a rug or a large table mat or even a placemat. So the extension table's key. But now I'm going to start to climb up the sides. So instead of sewing it exactly to the side, I'm going to want to sew it more to the top of this cord right here, the previous round. So to do that, it's really simple. I'm just going to hold it up and sew so that when I'm pressing the two cords together, this other hand is holding the left side up. I've got the J-foot out to show you that that's why this leveling button might get in the way back in here. It might get caught on some of the previous stitching or fabric wrapping. So I'm still using that same open toe foot. So when I'm sewing this to the other, basically I'm doing the same thing. I'm just going around and holding this one end up. It's going to gently start to attach that previous round, that new round to the previous round, a little bit more to the top. Now, when you go a complete round going around, as you start to come up on top of that, it's easier to climb up on that previous round a little bit more to the top. But if you want a really radical, well, not radical, but a pretty straight side, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to hold this cord in place. The trick is, as you're going around the bowl, the cord that lays on the top, if it's just a little bit more cord than the previous round, you'll get that nice shallow increase. But to go straight up the side, kind of like you're a potter building a pot, you're going to have to want to keep this round about the same equal length as the one before it, or as close as you can. How do you do that? Well, you can take your best friend in the sewing room, a Wonder Clip, and you can literally clip that on there to make sure that what you have is a round that is just about the same distance or length as the previous round before it. So you're going to clip up like this. That's just going to hold the length of the cord. And so as you're sewing, you're not trying to figure it out as you go. Now, some of you out there, I know what you're thinking, oh, I'll just pull this cord on the right-hand side as I'm sewing, and maybe it'll adjust it and keep it the same distance. It kind of really doesn't work. Now, if you do want to make a bowl that really curves in on the top, what you're going to do is you're going to adjust this so this next round is smaller and smaller and smaller. But be aware, you have to go around the head of the machine. So that gets really tricky to do. So now let's sew this, and remember, I'm just climbing up on the top and my clips are holding it in, so I know I have just the right amount as I'm coming up the top, and I take the clips out as I come to them. And I hope you can see, I'm going to pull it around so that you can see, I'm really starting to climb up and make that really sharp corner as it's coming up. So now this is going to be a bowl, and I'm not really going to embroider it. When I am going to do embroidery on the inside of my bowl, what I do is I stop before I start to make that turn, just like I've done for my little rug here on the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the machine over. I'm going to come back. I have a lot more cord to wrap anyway to finish this bowl. But I'm going to switch the machine over to embroidery. And let's talk about doing the embroidery on the base of the bowl. Or in my case, I'm making a big rug. The one thing you want to remember is you want to stop making the base so that it fits inside your hoop. More about that in a minute. So let me switch over and I'll come right back to you and we'll be ready to embroider our rug. Now, let's move on and do my rug. Isn't this pretty? Oh my goodness. I really love these designs. Now, this is my rug. The one thing that's cool about embroidering on a rug when you're making it like this is you're making the rug. So if I wanted to embroider the center of a rug, well, it would be kind of hard. Even though the altar is pretty big, well, I would have a hard time getting a giant rug in here. So, pretty cool to be making it and being able to embroider on it on the same time. Now, your design, I kind of call it a Goldilocks design. It's really not too heavy. You don't want a super dense, heavy design, and you want one that's got a little bit of beef to it, because a light design may just not show up. So I talk about that in the handout. I like these designs because they really work good for me. Now, I'm going to take the hoop. I've stopped making my rug, so I still have it attached to its previous cord. We're going to slide it under, and whenever I'm putting something heavy on, I like to hold the side of the arm, embroidery arm, and slide it on gently and then click everything into place. Now I want you to notice that my rug is going over the outside edge of my hoop. Now with the Altair, I have that great IQ positioning app, but to use it, I need to see this outside edge of the hoop, and, well, I got a little carried away. Fortunately, on this rug placement, I can use the 9-point placement system that's built into the Altair to get my flower in an okay place. But if I wanted precise positioning, I should have stopped making my base well before I got to that outside edge of the hoop, where it's bigger than the hoop. So I pulled up my design, and I'm going to put it in the upper right hand corner here to complete everything out. Now that 9-point placement system also has a trial feature. Let me show you. When I come to the machine, the screen, you can see that I've taken my design, I put it in the upper left hand corner. This outside edge shows me the area of my hoop, and I know that's approximately where I want it. And what I can do is I can touch this button right here and go to all the different spots around the design. I have 9 separate points to see exactly where I'm exactly looking at my design. So if I go into the upper left-hand corner of the design, I also just touch the little light, and you can see that the light shines down, and that shows me exactly where that corner is. I can also use the trial feature to go around that outside edge. So when I touch this feature, the machine is going to go around exactly where that design is. So even without my IQ positioning app, I can pretty much see exactly where this is going to be. Now let's talk a little bit more about sewing on something thick like this. Now I am sewing through this wrapped polypropylene cord, and like I said, that information is in the handout. So I am sewing on something thicker though. And I'm going through something that's more dense than your usual fabric. So I have my needle, and that's the same one that I told you about. This is the 7511 needle with that extra coating, and it's going to be slicker going through. But what I want to do is I want to check that the height of the presser foot is okay, and I want to slow the machine down. And why am I going to do that? Well, what happens is as the machine is stitching through something thick like this, it can build up friction. Have you ever done some embroidery and it's maybe you're doing a design that's already filled in, right? And maybe sometimes the thread shreds or the thread even breaks. Well, what happens is the friction can build up on that needle. So as the needle's going through the denser item, the denser material that you're embroidering on, it goes through that fabric, then it builds up heat. And that heat can actually get enough to even kind of melt that outside edge of the thread or even break the thread. So what you're going to want to use is that coating, that needle with the extra coating to make it a little bit slicker. And if you slow down the machine, that means it's not going so rapidly and you don't get that heat buildup. So how do you slow down the machine? So on the Altair, what I have is up here in the settings section, I can come and I can literally slow down my maximum embroidery speed. The machine can go up to 1050 stitches a minute. But I can also go down to 350 stitches a minute and really slow the machine down. Now down here is my embroidery foot height. Now generally, when I'm using this cord, I don't necessarily have to change the height of my foot. But you want to make sure that foot is not catching on anything as you embroider. So you can actually adjust the height of that foot. And when I did that trial feature, I could see that it was easily flowing over the top. So you can adjust the height of it and you can slow your machine down, put a good needle in there, the one with that coating, and we should be okay. We've placed our design. I put embroidery bobbin thread in the machine and an embroidery thread on the top. I really think I'm good to go. You can also, though, if you're doing a design, this one's kind of a specialty design because it makes bigger stitches that kind of look like hand sewing. I put the name of the embroidery design in your handout. Remember, all this information's in your handout as well. But if you have a more design that you might think might be too dense, you can also adjust the density of any embroidery design in the Baby Lock Altair as well. So I have that in the handout as well, and I've shown that a lot in previous videos. So enough yama yama. Let's make this rug really beautiful. Okay, so I've put my design in the corner. All I have to do is lower my presser foot. I've slowed down my machine, but I really don't want to go fast because I got a lot to go through. So let's go. So that design is done. Oh my goodness, such a big hoop. Oh my goodness. You can see I'm ready to continue on making my rug, but I think that is really pretty. I think I might actually be on trend. So now I'm going to take this out to secure this fabric in the hoop. I mean this rug part in the hoop. What I did is I used Floriani Wet and Gone Tacky, and you hoop that into your frame. You tear away the protective fabric, the protective paper coating, and this just sticks right in there. And it's really held this nice center of my rug really, really well. When I'm done doing all my embroidery, I just pull that away, and I'm going to soak it in water just to get that tacky out. You can see that, well, it might even almost be a reversible rug. Well, we'll see when we get that Wet and Gone Tacky out of there. But really, really pretty. Now remember the tricks to successful embroidery on a difficult item like this, or any embroidery. You want to match the needle to the project. You want to use an appropriate thread, of course. A bigger thread might be a different needle. Go to those websites of those needles, and they're going to give you tons of advice and suggestions. I slowed the machine down through this thick item, and I checked the height of my embroidery foot. Don't forget to put that embroidery foot back down to its regular normal setting after you do a project like this, and you can speed up your machine too. So I hope you've enjoyed making a rope coil rug with me and the bowls. Remember the handout, if you missed a part, the handout is all there, and the Baby Lock Altair really handled this project well. I'm going to send it off to George and ask him to tell you a little bit more about this machine, and go out there and you can embroider a rug.